He promised to end the war on day one in office. It's been 9 months. The war has not ended. And now Donald Trump has done what Joe Biden had been doing: impose sanctions. Only this one is worse. Trump has sanctioned Russian oil. This could wipe out up to 5% of global supplies. Will prices go up? And which countries will be the worst hit? We'll bring you the full story tonight. In China, they're writing a new chapter in de-dollarization. Beijing is making an aggressive push for the yuan, but can it really take on the greenback? In India, the government is taking on deepfakes. It's proposing an AI label to mark synthetic or machine-generated content. In South Korea, they've built their most powerful missile yet. They're calling it the monster missile. We'll tell you all about it. Also in focus, why the US has launched strikes in the Pacific, what is Saudi Arabia's kafala system and how its end impacts millions of migrant workers. Plus, celebrating an environmental success story. India's forests are growing, coverage has improved. It's a rare piece of good news in the age of climate change. And finally, is your bubble tea safe? New reports talk about hidden health risks. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will not be travelling to Malaysia this weekend to attend the ASEAN or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit. Instead, he will participate virtually. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will be leading the Indian delegation. The summit in Kuala Lumpur will host many global leaders, including US President Donald Trump. A Bangladesh court will deliver the verdict against Sheikh Hasina on the 13th of November. She is accused of committing crimes against humanity. The former Prime Minister is being tried in absentia. Prosecutors have demanded the death penalty if Hasina is found guilty. The verdict will come just 3 months ahead of elections in the country. After US Vice President Secretary of State Marco Rubio visits Israel, warns it against annexing the West Bank. This comes after the Israeli parliament gave preliminary approval to a bill calling for taking control of the territory. J.D. Vance said the decision was an insult to Israel's most important ally, the US. Nigerian army repels drone attacks by insurgents. A military barrack was torched. Vehicles and buildings were gutted. Around 50 attackers were killed by the troops. The violence took place in northeastern Nigeria, which has seen more than 300 attacks this year. And Storm Benjamin wreaks havoc across England, with heavy rain leading to floods. More than 15 flood alerts have been issued across the country. Travel has been severely disrupted. The storm is now headed towards Western Europe.
The United States is where it's
Donald Trump has tried everything to end the war in Ukraine. He tried scolding Ukraine. He tried cutting off weapons. He tried meeting with Vladimir Putin. None of it has worked yet. So Trump is falling back to America's favorite weapon: sanctions. The US government has sanctioned 2 Russian oil giants, Rosneft and Lukoil. Both are multi-billion-dollar firms. They form the backbone of Russia's oil industry, and sanctioning them is a bold move. Even Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, did not do it. And Biden was a big supporter of Kiev, yet he did not target Rosneft or Lukoil. So why has Trump done it? Well, he says it will make Putin more reasonable.
I think that they'll certainly have an impact. They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The 2 biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push... hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes 2 to tango, as they say, and we're going to find out.
Rosneft makes up half of Russia's oil output. That's domestic supply plus exports. Half of it. The sanctions may not affect the domestic supply, but they could hurt exports. Russia exports around 4 million barrels of oil every day. Rosneft and Lukoil make up half of that. So Trump is targeting 50% of Russia's oil exports. How? In two ways. One is direct sanctions. All Rosneft and Lukoil assets in the US will be frozen. No US citizen can do business with them. No US company can engage with them. If they do, they will face criminal or civil action. That's the first part of Trump's package. The second part is secondary sanctions. Say you're a bank or an insurance company in India or China or Brazil and you finance Russian oil purchases. Again, same result. You could be slapped with US sanctions, that is secondary sanctions. Now I know what you're thinking. The US has imposed some 7,000 sanctions on Russia. What's one more? Well, this one is different. In fact, there are two differences. A, this is the first sanction under Trump's presidency. All the others came under Joe Biden, so symbolically it's important. And B, this is uncharted territory. Until now, the West had not sanctioned Russian oil. They sanctioned banks, they sanctioned Russian gas, they sanctioned Russian officials, but never oil. Because the outcome was obvious. If you sanction Russian oil, the prices will rise. And we are seeing that right now. Oil prices rose more than 5% today. So simply put, these sanctions are more biting than previous ones. As expected, Russia has condemned them. They're calling it counterproductive.
We view this step as extremely counterproductive. It sends bad signal in terms of reaching significant negotiation progress on Ukrainian conflict settlement. If current U.S. administration starts to take their predecessors as example, that tried to make Russia abandon its national interests with illegal sanctions, the result will be absolutely the same.
Meanwhile, Ukraine is thrilled. President Zelensky welcomed Trump's package. He's also demanding more sanctions on Russian firms.
Sanctions are also very important. This is a good signal to other countries in the world to join the sanctions. You know that not only energy, we need shadow fleet, etc., and continue until Putin will stop this war. So these are decisions very important.
Europe also unveiled sanctions yesterday. They target Russian energy, banks and crypto. But there's a crucial difference. The EU only sanctioned the state-owned Rosneft. They have not sanctioned Lukoil, which is a private company. But let's take a step back. What is the emerging Western strategy against Russia? In one word, it's energy. The West is using energy to corner Russia. On the battlefield, they're attacking Russian oil facilities daily. Around 20% of Russia's capacity has been hit. And away from the battlefield, they're targeting Russian energy firms. Both these moves have the same objective: to choke Russia's oil supply and, by extension, to cut off their funds. Trump is hoping that this will bring Putin to the talking table. He was supposed to meet Putin in Budapest. He even announced it on social media, but days later, the meeting was put on hold. Trump says it did not feel right.
Canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington.
So this is a pressure tactic for Trump. He's using oil to bring Putin back to the table. The question is, will it work? Well, Putin is also falling back to his favorite tactic, and that is nuclear rhetoric. Yesterday, Russia's nuclear forces held military drills. An intercontinental ballistic missile was test-fired, plus nuclear bombers fired cruise missiles. Take a look at this. So Russia is not backing down. They want to make as much progress as possible. And that's where they disagree with Trump. Trump wants the front line to be frozen, but Putin does not, because a freeze would help Kiev. Ukraine is racking up defense deals in Europe. Yesterday, Sweden agreed to sell them some 100 fighter jets to Kiev. That's what Sweden is giving. So Zelensky would love to hit pause right now. That would give him time to build up his military strength. Naturally, Putin wants the opposite. The world is already paying a price for this war. If this new oil game escalates, that price could just become dearer.
Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies.
So Donald Trump has pulled the trigger on sanctions. He's targeting Russian suppliers directly, and the impact was immediate. Oil markets reacted and prices shot up. Brent crude jumped nearly 5% today. That is a 2-week high. And what exactly is Brent crude? Well, think of it as the world's price tag for oil. It's a bit like the US dollar. Just as the dollar drives global trade, Brent crude sets the benchmark for global oil prices. Specifically, about 2/3 of all internationally traded oil, dictated by Brent crude, 2/3. And that's exactly where Trump's sanctions are landing. So where does oil go from here? Will oil become more expensive? Chances are it will. Let's break it down for you. How do the sanctions affect the global supply of oil? Now, as you know, Russia is one of the biggest oil producers in the world, and Donald Trump has sanctioned Russia's biggest suppliers, Rosneft and Lukoil. These two companies supply 5.3 million barrels per day, 5.3 million barrels to the global markets. That's 5% of the global supply, coming from two Russian companies. Trump's sanctions hit this supply directly. That means wiping out 5% of the global supply from the market. When that happens, prices are bound to go up. It's simple economics. When there's less supply and more buyers, or the same demand but less supply, prices do rise. Going by one estimate, Brent crude could touch $70 a barrel. The current price is around $65. It could go up to $70, so brace for a hike. Next question, who will be hit? Well, most of the Russian oil is bought by two countries, China and India. We'll start with China. It's the biggest buyer of Russian oil. Last year, China bought more than 100 million tons of it. That's nearly 1/5 of China's total energy imports coming from Russia. Now, Beijing is under pressure to cut back. Trump wants to discuss this with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He says they will meet next week in South Korea.
I think I'll probably be talking about it. What I'll really be talking to him about is how do we end the war with Russia and Ukraine, whether it's through oil or energy or anything else. And I think he's going to be very receptive.
Trump says he has a meeting lined up with Xi Jinping, but China has yet to confirm that. And remember, China depends heavily on Russian supplies, so cutting it off entirely won't be easy, and finding an alternative source would also be tough. So it may be hit by US sanctions. The secondary sanctions, because while the sanctions are basically aimed at Russia, they also hurt any country or company that procures and pays for Russian crude, as we just discussed. So if you buy Russian oil, you will be hit. You'll have to find new and creative ways to pay for Russian shipments. And this means extra costs, including transportation and insurance of shipments. This would make Russian supplies more expensive and risky to procure, which is why China is opposing the latest sanctions.
China has consistently opposed unilateral sanctions that lack legal basis under international law and authorization by the United Nations Security Council.
Now let's talk about India. Just like China, India is also a major buyer of Russian oil. This year, 36% of India's oil imports have come from Russia, which is the same as last year. In 2024, India bought Russian oil worth $52 billion, which was 37% of India's total oil bill. But now Trump says India is ready to bring it down.
You know, it's a process. You can't just stop it. But by the end of the year, they'll be down to almost nothing. That's a big thing. That was almost 40% of the oil. India, they've been great. Spoke to Prime Minister Modi yesterday. They've been absolutely great.
New Delhi has not confirmed that yet, but once the sanctions take effect, India is likely to comply. Refiners in India have issued statements. They say they will follow government guidelines. Remember, India did the same thing in the past as well. It complied with sanctions on Venezuela and Iran. So it won't be a surprise if New Delhi cuts back on Russian oil this time too. But if it comes to that, India will have to rebalance its energy mix. It will have to find new suppliers, and it will have to ensure that consumers do not end up paying higher prices. India's energy policy has shown resilience in the past, but this time it faces a new test. Trump's sanctions have created a new global risk. They remind the world of the uncertainty around a financial system controlled by the United States. And the US dollar is at the center of the system. It is the default currency for global trade. Most countries depend on the dollar, and now China wants to change that. Beijing is making quiet moves. It wants to push the Chinese currency, the yuan, into the global spotlight. And for this, Beijing has started work on two fronts. The first one is currency swaps. China is talking to Japan and South Korea. It is pitching a currency swap agreement with them. The idea is quite simple: promote the use of the yuan in regional trade. And what is a currency swap? It's basically a deal between central banks. They agree to exchange their currencies with each other, and this helps countries borrow in their own currency. They can avoid using the dollar altogether. China has such deals with many countries, but this one would be different because Japan and South Korea are strong US allies. They have a close trade and defense relationship with Washington. But they have been hit by American tariffs too. And that has given China an opening. Beijing sees this as a rare opportunity, a chance to move closer to two key American allies in the region, Japan and South Korea. China is pitching the yuan as a more stable option, a currency that is less affected by politics. You see, Trump's trade war has weakened the dollar. It has dropped in value. That helps China make a case for the yuan, and that is the first step in Beijing's plan, using currency swaps to expand its reach. That's the first part. The second front is debt. China is offering cheaper loans in the yuan. It is offering refinancing to existing creditors, so they can convert their debt from American dollars to the Chinese yuan. And how does it help? Well, China's interest rates are lower, so borrowing in the yuan means lower repayment. Lower interest rates, so lower EMIs, basically. Several countries have already taken this offer. Ethiopia is among them. Ethiopia had a $5.3 billion loan with China. They have converted this debt into yuan. Similarly, Kenya has also converted a loan they had borrowed from China for a railway project. By switching from the US dollar to the Chinese yuan, Kenya has saved $215 million in repayment. Meanwhile, some countries have started borrowing directly in the yuan, like Hungary and Kazakhstan. They recently sold bonds in the Chinese currency. Sri Lanka has borrowed in the yuan for a highway project. The loan was for $500 million US. But the debt is denominated in the yuan. Now, so far this year, governments and institutions have issued loans worth 68 billion yuan, which is about $9.5 billion US. This amount has doubled from last year. Every deal like this one means less dependence on the dollar and a stronger role for the yuan. Same for global trade. The yuan's role is rising there too in global trade. It accounts for 8.5% of all transactions now. This makes it the fifth most traded currency in the world, right behind the British pound. The share of the pound is around 10%, so China is closing in. But does that make it a serious challenger to the greenback? Well, as of today, they're far from it. The dollar still dominates global trade. An overwhelming majority of all transactions still happen in the US dollar, so the yuan is not an immediate threat. But it is making strides, and China is playing the long game as always. In June, the governor of China's central bank gave a statement. He made Beijing's intentions quite clear. He said, and I quote, "The world is moving towards a multipolar currency system." He said the world relies too much on the dollar, and he made a prediction that several strong currencies will check and balance each other. Of course, none of this spells good news for Donald Trump. Protecting the US dollar is one of his biggest political promises. But China's latest moves have turned up the heat. The message from Beijing is clear. The greenback is on notice. To see is to believe. It's such a prophetic piece of advice, and yet so simple. If you can see it, you believe it. If you can't, you don't. But I'm afraid it does not apply in 2025. Thanks to artificial intelligence, you can't believe even what you see. We live in the era of deepfakes and AI edits. Everyone is wondering how this problem can be curbed, and India is working on a solution. The IT ministry has proposed new AI rules. In a nutshell, they mandate AI labels for synthetic content, which raises two questions. One, what is synthetic content? And two, how will these AI labels be mandated? Let me quote the IT ministry first. This is how they define synthetic content. Information which is artificially or algorithmically created, generated, modified or altered using a computer resource in a manner that such information reasonably appears to be authentic or true. Well, that's a very broad definition. It certainly covers all AI-generated content, like a photo that you created using ChatGPT, or a video you made using Sora, or a song you composed using Perplexity. All of these will be labeled as synthetic information. Having said that, there is a gray area too. For instance, what if I use AI to enhance my own picture, or maybe to edit a video? Does it still count as synthetic? Well, that part is not clear yet. Now to the second question. How will it be labeled? The AI label must cover 10% of the content. Say you have generated a picture on ChatGPT, then the label should cover 10% of the picture's surface area. The onus is on users and companies. AI companies will have to include these labels in their output. Social media companies will have to detect AI content, and users will have to declare AI content. These are very strict rules to regulate AI. What triggered it? Well, India has 1 billion internet users. It's also one of the fastest growing AI markets, but this market is not always clean. We've seen multiple actors go to court over deepfakes. We've seen political parties complain about AI clips. So right now it's the Wild West, and the IT ministry flagged that too. Let me quote again. The potential of generative AI tools to cause user harm, spread misinformation, manipulate elections, and impersonate individuals has grown significantly. So the idea is not to curb AI content. The idea is to inform the audience. You can still watch AI content, but you should know that you're watching AI content. You shouldn't mistake it for reality. And India is not the first to do this. The European Union has passed such an AI act. Like India, it requires synthetic content to be labeled. China has also introduced AI rules. Again, synthetic content must be labeled. It requires platforms to detect and flag such content. So the idea itself, like I said, is not new. And to be fair, some AI companies already do it. Meta and Google, for example. When their bots create content, they already have AI labeling. The likes of YouTube and Instagram also have similar labels, but clearly more needs to be done. Plus, you can't depend on these companies alone. You need regulation to enforce these rules. And here's how that will work. Say there's an actor's deepfake on Facebook. The user has not declared it, and Facebook has not detected it. Then Facebook could be held liable for that crime, not just the user who posted it, but also the platform that hosted it. So the stakes are high for these companies, and we say it's necessary. Yes, it needs some refinement, but the idea itself is welcome. And for a change, India is among the pioneers. AI regulation is still a grey area in many countries. A lot of governments are afraid to touch it. They feel it will drive away AI companies. I'm sure New Delhi faces those pressures too. But when it comes to online safety and authenticity, there can be no compromise.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Pakistan or the DLP, Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif will chair Federal Cabinet meeting to discuss the same. Pakistan Federal Cabinet will be discussing key issues, which also includes a ban on TLP, on Pak-Afghan ceasefire discussions likely expected, Afghan refugees repatriation and overall security situation in the country. Because do remember, overall the situation remains tense still. Sources also adding that the federal government is adopting hard state policy against extremist religious groups. And Pakistan Defence Minister will be briefing the federal cabinet on the Pakistan-Afghanistan ceasefire as well. Immediate agreement in Doha last week. All of that on the agenda. The federal cabinet will then discuss the new Afghan policy, which Pakistan drafted after Afghan Taliban foreign minister's India visit. Going across to Akanksha Sarup, who joins us with more details. Akanksha, we've seen the kind of protests that have been staged by the TLP in the recent past and the crackdown that's come in from the top in Pakistan against the same. But tell us a little bit about what all could be discussed through the meeting. We've broadly laid out for our viewers the key issues that are going to be put on the table, but what's expected as a result of this?
Right. Krithween, in inputs that have been shared by Securities Editor Manoj Gupta, what we are learning is that the Federal Cabinet will also be approving the terms of reference for the next round of Pakistan-Afghan ceasefire talks that are all set to take place on 25th of October in Istanbul. And remember, Turkey is playing a very critical role, as is Qatar. And if you are to talk about the overall priority of this federal cabinet meeting, it is going to be with regards to the recent conflict that happened across the Durand line between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The big question that everybody is asking right now across the globe, not just in Afghanistan and Pakistan or India, is that for how long will this ceasefire hold? It's a very fragile ceasefire. So the federal cabinet will also be discussing the new Afghan policy, which Pakistan drafted after Afghan Taliban foreign minister visit. Remember, Amir Khan Muttaqi was in India, and that has really ruffled feathers within the Pakistan deep state and the Pak establishment. The recent Durand line conflict has rattled Pakistan significantly. The Pakistan Defence Minister Khwaja Asif is all set to brief the federal cabinet on the ceasefire with regards to the immediate agreement that was struck upon last week in Doha. And they are adopting a hard state policy against extremist religious group that, of course, also refers to not just TLP, but also the TTP. But a key decision to ban a religious party like Tehreek-e-Labbaik is also likely to be discussed, and it's likely to take place also, is what top sources have told CNN News 18 and Manoj Gupta. As you also shared, the Pakistan federal government will be receiving the Punjab provincial government's proposal and the recommendations to ban Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan party. But remember, this federal cabinet meet is also to discuss the overall situation in the country. They are violently cracking down on the Afghan refugees as we speak within Pakistan. And as has already been indicated by the Defence Minister of Pakistan, Khwaja Asif, that the relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan no longer remain the same. Henceforth, they are packing up thousands and thousands of Afghan refugees and repatriating them. In fact, many of them were residing in various bastis as far as the Sindh province is concerned since the 1980s. And so they are all being sent back. that is also going to be one topic of discussion. But Pakistan is going through this internal security tussle, whether it is from the Durand Line as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Look what's happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. There is bound to be a parliamentary sort of intervention taking place in the days ahead as far as the POK government change is concerned. They are already battling.
Our next story is from South Korea. They have built a new missile, bigger, faster and more powerful than anything they've made before. It's called the Hyunmoo-5. Locals call it the monster missile. Experts say it's a bunker buster. It's a weapon that can strike deep underground targets with pinpoint precision. And it's more than just a missile, it's also a message. Seoul wants to shift the balance of power in the region. After decades of relying on American protection, South Korea now wants to defend itself with homegrown firepower. The goal is clear: to match North Korea's missile buildup at a time when Kim Jong-un is testing more rockets than ever before. Here's a report.
South Korea is building a new weapon. It's called Hyunmoo-5, but the locals have a different name for it. They call it the monster missile. It's the biggest ballistic missile South Korea has ever made, and it signals a major change in the country's defence strategy. For decades, South Korea depended on the United States for protection, but rising tensions with North Korea have changed that. Seoul now wants to rely more on its own strength. So what is the Hyunmoo-5? It's a massive surface-to-surface missile. It weighs around 36 tons. That's roughly the weight of a heavy truck. It can carry a warhead weighing up to 8 tons. That makes it one of the most powerful non-nuclear missiles in the entire world. The Hyunmoo-5 is a bunker buster. That means it can hit underground targets. Targets like tunnels or bunkers where North Korea's leaders might hide during a war. It's around 16 meters long. It can be launched from a mobile vehicle. That makes it harder to track and easier to move. Its range varies. With a heavy warhead, it can travel around 600 kilometers. With a lighter one, it can go more than 5,000 kilometers. That puts all of North Korea and parts of China and Russia within range. The idea for this missile came years ago. In 2010, North Korea attacked the South twice. It sank the Cheonan warship. Then it shelled Yongpyong Island. 50 South Koreans were killed. Those attacks changed Seoul's thinking. South Korea realised it needed a stronger deterrent, but it doesn't have nuclear weapons. It relies on the US nuclear umbrella, a defence promise from Washington. So South Korea chose another path. If it couldn't build nuclear weapons, it would build the most powerful conventional ones instead. That's where Hyunmoo-5 comes in. At first, the project was restricted. US rules limited how large South Korean missiles could be. But in 2017, Donald Trump lifted those limits. That happened soon after North Korea tested a hydrogen bomb. With that approval, the Hyunmoo-5 development was accelerated. Now, South Korea plans to deploy the missile by the end of this year. Defence Minister Ahn Gyu-bak says the country must build a considerable number of them. His goal? To create what he calls a balance of terror. In simple terms, it means matching North Korea's threat with equal force. President Lee Jae-myung supports that vision. He wants South Korea to become more self-reliant in defence. He has criticised what he calls a submissive mindset, the belief that Seoul cannot defend itself without outside help. The missile also fits into South Korea's growing defence industry. The country now spends more than North Korea's entire GDP on its military every year. It ranks 5th in global military strength, and its arms exports are rising fast, especially after the war in Ukraine. At a recent arms fair in Seoul, President Lee promised even bigger defence spending. He wants South Korea to become the world's 4th largest defence exporter. But the big question remains, will the Yanmu 5 keep the peace or make tensions worse? North Korea has already shown off its own new missile, the Hwasong-20. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of reaching the US mainland. For South Korea, the Yanmu 5 is not just a weapon. It's a statement, a sign that the country is ready to defend itself, and that it no longer wants to rely only on allies. But in a region already tense with nuclear weapons and rival missiles, every new move adds more pressure. The monster missile may bring balance, or it may bring the next great test for peace on the Korean peninsula.
Now let's talk about tensions on the other side of the Pacific. Tensions brewing between the US, Colombia and Venezuela. We've been telling you about the US strikes in the Caribbean. Washington has been attacking what it calls drug boats. And now it has turned to targets in the Pacific. This is the first such attack. American forces have bombed 2 vessels in the Pacific, one on Tuesday and the second one on Wednesday. The US says these boats were carrying narcotics. Their strikes killed 5 people and they've opened a new front in Donald Trump's war on drugs. Take a look at the images first. This video was released by the US Secretary of War. His name is Pete Hegseth. He called it a lethal kinetic strike. He said the vessel was operated by, and I'm quoting again, a designated terrorist organization. Pete Hegseth compared them to the Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group behind the 9/11 attacks. He said, and I'm quoting again, just as Al-Qaeda waged a war on our homeland, these cartels are waging war on our border and our people. By likening drug cartels to Al-Qaeda, he's made America's posture quite clear. Washington sees this as a war. And that's a big shift. It's also a controversial shift because the US has not provided any evidence. Did the boats actually have drugs? We don't know. Who was operating them? Which group did they belong to? Again, we don't know. The US is just calling them narco-terrorists. No proof, no trial, just strikes. Let's put this into perspective. The Americans have carried out at least 7 such attacks in the Caribbean. Together, they have killed around 37 people. The White House says this is about stopping drug trafficking into America, and Donald Trump insists they're saving lives.
The only way you can't feel bad about it is you realize that you won't feel badly about it, is you realize that every time you see that happen, you're saving 25,000 American lives. Every one of those boats that gets knocked out is saving 25,000 American lives, not to mention the torn up families all over the country. And whenever I see that, I say to myself, I just saved 25,000 lives.
So Trump has called the strikes self-defense, but experts say it looks more like a military campaign. They've called it, and I'm quoting, a breach of the UN Charter and an extrajudicial execution. And it's not just about the strikes, it's also become personal between the leaders. Donald Trump has trained his guns on the presidents of Colombia and Venezuela. The Colombian president is Gustavo Petro. Trump has accused him of making drugs. That's what he said. He's making drugs. He's also called Petro a thug and a bad guy. And he has cut aid to Colombia. Remember, the US and Colombia have been close allies in the region. They have been partners in the war on drugs for decades. But in recent months, the ties have nosedived and Colombia has hit back sharply. President Petro has said that he would take legal action in American courts. He's also called the U.S. strikes in the Pacific acts of murder. Next door, Venezuela has also been furious. Like I said, the U.S. has conducted several strikes off its coast. Venezuela's president is Nicolas Maduro. He says Washington is using the strikes as a cover for regime change. And he has warned that any attack on Venezuelan soil will be an act of war. And now Maduro is also putting on a show of force. Yesterday he said Venezuela has 5,000 Russian missiles, enough to counter the U.S. forces.
Every military force in the world is aware of the power of the Igla-S, and Venezuela has deployed no fewer than 5,000 Igla-S in key air defense positions to ensure the peace, stability, and tranquility of its people. More than 5,000. Those who understand, understand.
He's talking about the Russian-made Igla-S missiles. These are short-range, shoulder-fired missiles. They can shoot down low-flying aircraft. Maduro says they're deployed across Venezuela. It's his way of saying, don't mess with us. But the U.S. is doubling down. They have deployed warships, F-35 fighter jets, and even a nuclear submarine to the Caribbean. Thousands of American troops are on standby, ostensibly for a counter-narcotics operation. But in reality, it's turning into a geopolitical showdown. Washington says the strikes are necessary. The South American countries say they're acts of war. Clearly, this is no longer about drugs, though. It's about power and control. Growth is often billed as a trade-off. You want a factory? You will have to clear out some forest. You want a new metro line? You'll have to cut some trees. You want more oil production at home? Well, some more trees will have to be cut. This trade-off is even more stark in developing countries. On one side is the pressure to grow, to lift your people out of poverty. On the other side is the pressure to protect nature, to mitigate climate change. And a lot of countries struggle to balance these pressures. But looks like India is not one of them. Let me show you a new United Nations report. It tracks forest cover in countries. India moved up one spot this year. It now stands at the 9th place. We now have 72 million hectares of forest, which is 2% of the world total. At number 1 is Russia. They have a whopping 832 million hectares of forest. Brazil is second with 486 million. Canada is third with 368 million. The US is fourth with 308 million and China is fifth with 227 million hectares of forest cover. I'm sure you've noticed the trend. The bigger your country, the bigger your forests. And India moved up one place. But that's not the only reason to cheer. The report also looked at the gains made by each country. How much did the forest cover increase annually? And China led this list. Their forest cover expanded by 1.7 million hectares. Russia came in second with 942,000 hectares, and India was at the third place. India's forest cover expanded by 191,000 hectares. Now, some experts have advised caution. They say India's definition of forest cover is not adequate. Therefore, take these numbers with a pinch of salt. But you can't discount the broader trend, nor can you discount the context. India is not a developed country like Canada or the US. India is not a sparsely populated country like Russia, nor is it an autocracy like China. Here we have vibrant ecological movements. We have a history of public protests against deforestation. We have 1.4 billion people to satisfy and provide for, yet our forest cover is growing rapidly. And all of this while being the fastest growing major economy. It's certainly something to be proud of. The question is, how was it achieved? Well, the government has listed out some initiatives, like the Aravali Green Wall. It aims to reforest the 700-kilometer mountain range. It stretches all the way from Delhi to Gujarat. Another initiative is the Green India Mission. Again, the focus is on reforestation. It has already restored green cover to 155,000 hectares. Then you have the Plant for Mother scheme. It has planted some 1.4 billion saplings so far. You'll see the results in a few years from now. But beyond missions, beyond initiatives, there's also something about culture. Living in harmony with nature comes naturally to India. Forests play a key role in religion. They feature heavily in Indian mythology and history, and today even in pop culture. Just look at the biggest movie of the year. It's a Kannada film called Kantara. It follows the story of forest dwellers and their guardians, the movie Kantara. So my point is quite simple. Unlike other countries, we don't look at forests as only commodities. We respect and revere forests. The key is to turn that respect into policy. And we have many examples of that. Look at the various wildlife conservation projects. India's tiger population has doubled in 10 years. The lion population has risen by 30% in 5 years. All of this adds to forest conservation because animals sustain and enrich forests. Let's hope this is a lesson to developing countries around the world. The West may make you pick between growth and nature, but you don't have to. A balance is always possible. Our final story tonight is about a drink that's everywhere. It's colorful, it's sweet, and it's instantly recognizable. Bubble tea, or boba. It has gone from being a local Taiwanese creation to a worldwide obsession. It is now as common as coffee on high streets across different cities, and it has become a fashion statement popularized by social media. But as its popularity grows, so do the questions about what's really inside those cups. Recent tests have raised health concerns. They have revealed lead traces, high sugar levels, and even links to kidney stones in extreme cases. So what's emerging is a picture that is far less sweet than the drink itself. Tonight, we take a closer look at the drink that has taken over the internet and ask whether your bubble tea is really as safe as it seems.
It's sweet. It's trendy. And it's everywhere. Bubble tea, or boba, has gone from a local Taiwanese drink to a global craze. Born in the 1980s, it blends tea, milk, sugar, and chewy tapioca pearls. It's not just a drink anymore. It is a trend, a social media staple.
So good.
An aesthetic accessory for the internet generation. Cafes across major cities like London, Singapore, and New York now compete to serve the perfect cup. Its colors, flavors, and textures have made it a viral favorite online. And the craze is only growing. The global bubble tea market is reportedly projected to touch $4.78 billion by 2032. From a street-side experiment in Taiwan to a billion-dollar global industry, bubble tea has become part of pop culture. But behind the cute packaging, there's growing concern about what's really inside. Consumer safety tests in the United States found trace levels of lead in tapioca pearls. The pearls are made from cassava, a root that absorbs heavy metals from the soil. Every sample tested contained some amount of lead. None were immediately dangerous, but the findings raised concern. Experts say repeated exposure, even in small amounts, can build up over time. Some companies have already stopped selling certain boba products or tightened their safety checks. Beyond contamination, there are health risks from overconsumption. Tapioca pearls are mostly starch. Too many can slow digestion and, in rare cases, cause intestinal blockages. In Taiwan, a 20-year-old woman developed more than 300 kidney stones after relying on bubble tea instead of water. Doctors linked the case to excessive sugar and oxalate levels. Of all the health risks, sugar remains the biggest concern. A single cup can contain 20 to 50 grams of sugar, which is more than a can of cola. That raises the risk of obesity, diabetes, and dental problems, especially in young people. Health authorities advise limiting daily sugar intake. But even low-sugar versions may not help much because the pearls themselves are soaked in syrup. There's also a safety risk for children. Doctors warn that the pearls can be a choking hazard. Even adults are not immune to this. According to reports, a 19-year-old woman died in China after inhaling 3 pearls when sucking harder on a partially blocked straw. So, is bubble tea safe? In moderation, yes, but as a daily habit, not really. Health experts suggest smaller cups, fewer toppings, and less sugar. And if you are thirsty, opt for plain water rather than bubble tea. The drink that conquered the internet may be delicious and colorful, but like all sugary treats, it's best enjoyed occasionally, not constantly.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Pakistan or the DLP, Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif will chair Federal Cabinet meeting to discuss the same. Pakistan Federal Cabinet will be discussing key issues, which also includes a ban on TLP, on Pak-Afghan ceasefire discussions likely expected, Afghan refugees repatriation and overall security situation in the country. Because do remember, overall the situation remains tense still. Sources also adding that the federal government is adopting hard state policy against extremist religious groups. And Pakistan Defence Minister will be briefing the federal cabinet on the Pakistan-Afghanistan ceasefire as well. Immediate agreement in Doha last week. All of that on the agenda. The federal cabinet will then discuss the new Afghan policy, which Pakistan drafted after Afghan Taliban foreign minister's India visit. Going across to Akanksha Swaroop, who joins us with more details. Akanksha, we've seen the kind of protests that have been staged by the TLP in the recent past and the crackdown that's come in from the top in Pakistan against the same. But tell us a little bit about what all could be discussed through the meeting. We've broadly laid out for our viewers the key issues that are going to be put on the table, but what's expected as a result of this?
Right. Krithvi, in inputs that have been shared by Securities Editor Manoj Gupta, what we are learning is that the Federal Cabinet will also be approving the terms of reference for the next round of Pakistan-Afghan ceasefire talks that are all set to take place on 25th of October in Istanbul. And remember, Turkey is playing a very critical role, as is Qatar. And if you are to talk about the overall priority of this federal cabinet meeting, it is going to be with regards to the recent conflict that happened across the Durand line between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The big question that everybody is asking right now across the globe, not just in Afghanistan, Pakistan or India, is that for how long will this ceasefire hold? It's a very fragile ceasefire. So the federal cabinet will also be discussing the new Afghan policy, which Pakistan drafted after Afghan Taliban foreign minister visit. Remember, Amir Khan Muttaqi was in India, and that has really ruffled feathers within the Pakistan deep state and the Pak establishment. The recent Durand line conflict has rattled Pakistan significantly. The Pakistan Defence Minister Khwaja Asif is all set to brief the federal cabinet on the ceasefire with regards to the immediate agreement that was struck upon last week in Doha. And they are adopting a hard state policy against extremist religious group that, of course, also refers to not just TLP, but also the TTP. But a key decision to ban a religious party like Tehreek-e-Labbaik is also likely to be discussed, and it's likely to take place also, is what top sources have told CNN News 18 and Manoj Gupta. As you also shared, the Pakistan federal government will be receiving the Punjab provincial government's proposal and the recommendations to ban Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan party. But remember, this federal cabinet meet is also to discuss the overall situation in the country. They are violently cracking down on the Afghan refugees as we speak within Pakistan. And as has already been indicated by the Defence Minister of Pakistan, Khwaja Asif, that the relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan no longer remain the same. Henceforth, they are packing up thousands and thousands of Afghan refugees and repatriating them. In fact, many of them were residing in various bastis as far as the Sindh province is concerned since the 1980s. And so they are all being sent back. that is also going to be one topic of discussion. But Pakistan is going through this internal security tussle, whether it is from the Durand Line as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Look what's happening in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. There is bound to be a parliamentary sort of intervention taking place in the days ahead as far as the POK government change is concerned. They are already battling insurgency at the hands of the Baloch. So a host of issues over there and also indicating an internal security lapse and failures by the Pakistan army under Asim Munir.
Okay, many thanks, Akanksha, for joining us with all those details. Do want to take in an expert take on this. KP Fabian joins us for more. He's a former diplomat, so he's going to come in and tell us what he makes of the ongoing situation. Pakistan on the boil still, Mr. Fabian. Good morning. Thank you for taking out the time. Sir, what are your thoughts on how Pakistan is tackling with some of these challenges? The TLP protests that have been ongoing, remember there's a tight crackdown we've witnessed, but the situation is not entirely normal. Also, we're learning the Pakistan Federal Cabinet could discuss other issues like the Pakistan-Afghanistan ceasefire, the new Afghan policy, and also the approval. They're looking at approving the terms of references for next round of Pak-Afghanistan ceasefire talks in Istanbul. Your thoughts, sir? How do you think how effectively or ineffectively is Pakistan looking at this multi-pronged challenge, staring at it?
Thank you. Well, one can say
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In New Zealand, thousands hit the streets demanding better working conditions. In Australia, millions of red crabs rushed to the beach for breeding season. And in London, a Parkinson's patient plays the clarinet during her brain operation. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2001, Apple introduced the first ever iPod. The device revolutionized the way people heard music. It sold some 450 million devices, but eventually was replaced by smartphones. Apple discontinued the iPod in 2022. We are leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
This is News 18 Network. India's knowledge.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in at the top of the bulletin. We're ahead of the Bihar elections. A big statement coming in from Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he was addressing booth-level workers of the BJP. He has alleged that the India bloc harbors hatred towards Biharis and they should answer why they have made derogatory statements against the people from Bihar. underlining the statements from DMK leaders in Tamil Nadu. The Prime Minister added that the Congress and the RJD must also respond to the abuse and insult of Bihar and its people coming in from top India bloc leaders. Now, taking a swipe at the term Mahagathbandhan, Prime Minister Modi also said that the people of Bihar call it the Latbandhan Alliance. Listen in.
जो लोग अपने आप को गठबंधन कहते हैं, बिहार की जनता जिनको लठबंधन कहती है, वो सिर्फ लड़ चलाना जानते हैं, झगड़ा करना जानते हैं और झगड़ते रहते हैं। देखा आपने, लठबंधन वालों के लिए अपना स्वार्थ ही सबसे बड़ा है। इन्हें बिहार के युवाओं की चिंता नहीं है। मैं मानता हूं बिहार की 2 पीढ़ी का भविष्य बर्बाद किया इन्होंने। उसमें से बिहार को बाहर लाने में बड़ी मेहनत पड़ रही है, लेकिन हम लोग कर रहे हैं। हमने 2014 के बाद से बहुत मेहनत की है। एनडीए ने जंगल राज के अंधेरे से निकालकर बिहार को विकास की नई रोशनी में लाने का काम किया है। आज बिहार में हम नक्सलवाद, माओवादी, आतंकवाद को समाप्त करने की तरफ बहुत तेजी से बढ़ रहे हैं। बिहार के नौजवानों के भविष्य को सुरक्षित करना हमारा कर्तव्य है और हम इसके लिए पूरी ईमानदारी से काम कर रहे हैं।
Right, that is the pitch that's coming from Prime Minister Narendra Modi when it comes to the battle in Bihar. We're also getting a reaction from BJP Shahzad Poonawala, who's also reacted on this entire matter as the war of words continues to escalate in Bihar ahead of the elections, given the fact that the India bloc has chosen Tejasvi Yadav as its chief minister.